We are focusing on promoting renewables with members from both the private and the public sector. We are at the moment discussing with Slokat the partnership, because it's very clear that renewables are providing solutions for the electricity sector, the heating and cooling, and the transport sector. But I would agree with Courtney that the solutions that are out there and the ambitions of a country such as Sweden are not so well known on a global scale. So there is definitely scope for further promotion. We are issuing an annual report, the Renewables Global Status Report, which provides an overview on industry, market, and investment trends and policy trends in the renewable space. And I'm going to just, in a nutshell, take you through the main findings with that have a relevance to the transport sector. So I'm not going to talk about heating and cooling and a little bit about electricity, because technically there is a link. When we look at the evolution of renewables, and I have to say that I have the feeling that at this COP, it's the first time that you really feel that renewables are very centrally positioned as a main part of the solution to abate climate change. But when you look at this evolution, you effectively see that things in the last decade have changed dramatically. Installed capacities of new renewables have increased by about 8-fold. We had substantial cost reductions, technologies are spreading, and also policies are spreading all around the world. And then on the lower two lines, you effectively see the numbers of biofuels, and they are also huge increase both in ethanol production from 28.5 billion liters in 2004 to 94 billion in 2014, and then factor 10 increase in the field of biodiesel from 2.4 to 29.7. But nevertheless, despite all these advances, when we look at the share of renewable energy in final energy consumption, we still see that this share is fairly moderate. About 19% of global final energy consumption is provided by renewables, with a growing share of modern renewables and unfortunately decreasing share of traditional biomass. Now, when you put that into perspective, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has issued an objective of sustainable energy for all, of doubling the share of renewables from 18% in 2010 to 36% in 2030. So not as ambitious as Sweden, but for a global scale, a target to which most of the countries have agreed, which is combined with energy efficiency, because I think with all the considerations that we mentioned, it also when you mentioned about behavior, but also when you mentioned about technology, we must also make sure that we consume less energy and that we focus on the demand side. And then, of course, it also contains an objective of providing energy access for all by 2030, because there's still 15% of the population that do not have access to electricity. So, what we also do in the Global Status Report, we provide an overview on how different countries are performing, because we know that people are competitive not only in football, but also when it comes to renewable energy. And what I think is very interesting at this slide is that when you look at overall investment numbers, you have what I would call the usual suspects, like China, the US, Japan, UK, Germany. But when you look at investment in renewables relative to GDP, suddenly the list reads completely different. And you have a series of developing countries, and you see that these countries where energy demand is continuing to grow are investing even more in renewables, which I think is a very positive signal, and which clearly is also the signal that costs have come down so much that these options are becoming really the economically preferred options for countries. And then on the slide also the countries with most production in biodiesel and fuel ethanol. So When we look at the power sector, we have a situation that about 28% of global power generating capacity is renewables-based. About 23% of global electricity demand is produced with renewables. And last year, about 60% of all newly built power plants were renewables-based. So we see that the share of renewables is rapidly increasing, and we have situations where the share of variable renewables is really going up quite significantly. In Denmark, about 40% of electricity consumed in 2014 was produced through wind. In Nicaragua, about 21%, 27% in Portugal, and so that shows that, of course, we have some constraints or some challenges that the electricity system faces with integrating these high shares of variable renewables, and that, of course, makes the link to electric transport a very attractive one, because it provides a solution for storing the electricity when it is produced, and clearly we think that we're going to see more and more electric mobility in the years to come. Overall, when we look at our results in the transport sector, we still have a fairly small share of renewables, about 3.5% for global road global energy demand for road transport. It was doubling compared to 2007, but of course we are still on a global scale far away from the total fossil-free transport sector. We see that electric mobility is rapidly increasing. For example, and clearly the things that are happening in China, they cannot be ignored. Before coming here to the COP, I read a statistic that in September this year, in 2015, 28,000 electric cars and plug-in hybrids were sold in China. That is the total amount of the fleet of Germany. So everything that Germany has installed has in terms of electric cars and plug-in hybrids was purchased in 1 month in China, which I think really shows the scale on how things go up. The same, we have lots of electric buses, the two-wheelers in China, and then China, for example, mandated that electric vehicles make up at least 30% of all vehicles purchased for government fleets by 2016. So we see that, of course, technologies continue to have to be developed, but we also see that policy really has to step in. Some statistics also on the biofuels. I'm going to skip them now, but you find them in the report, which you can download from our website. What we also do is we track policy, and there we see that the policy frameworks for renewables have really advanced dramatically in the course of the last decade. We had about 48 countries with targets on renewable energy in 2004. In 2014, it is 164 countries. And you see also that in the transport sector, for example, countries with biofuels mandates are increasing. However, we still see that the majority of policy frameworks and policy targets are to be found in the electricity sector, and more the introduction of electric vehicles is then also coupled with renewable energy combustion measures. So, in a nutshell, a really positive development. I think one of the reasons why renewables are also quite centrally positioned in this COP is the fact that for the first time in 40 years, in 2014 we managed to decouple economic growth and CO2. We had a situation where the economy grew, where the energy demand grew, but for the first time in 40 years, CO2 emissions remained stable, went down, and that was mainly due to in the energy sector, that was due to investment in energy efficiency and renewables in both the OECD countries and in China. And I think that is a very positive signal, which clearly needs to be accelerated in the years to come, and hopefully with an ambitious outcome of the climate negotiations, that will be the case. Nevertheless, in summary, I would say we are doing really well as far as renewables are concerned in the electricity sector, but I think what we need in the future more and more is more attention to heating and cooling, which I didn't touch upon today because it goes beyond the topic, but also the transport sector. And I think what we need to do more in the years to come is to think the energy system as an overall system, and to think about integration, and clearly the target and the ambitions of Sweden, I think, are very welcome, because they will also be an inspiration for other countries in the world.
Thank you so much for Christine. And so now that was the perspective on the renewable energy. So remember that we are clean and bränsledependent. Let's move from bränsle, the fuel, to the behavior. Björn Ola, I'm going to put your presentation forward. Hold on a second.
Thanks. Well, thanks. I am a professor. My name is Björn Ola. I'm a professor at the Center for Climate Science and Policy Research in Linköping University. I'm not a transport researcher, so that's not why I'm here. I and my colleagues, we study the international policy measures, both at the international diplomacy level, like here at the UNFCCC, and the instruments associated with that, but also comparative politics with what different countries do. For instance, like we have all the INDCs now to compare what different countries do. And I think it's in that capacity that I've been asked to speak here, because what we can see clearly when we analyze the different policy measures is that transport continues to be, if not a blind spot, so still a great spot in policy making, both in many countries, but also here at the UNFCCC. It's mentioned often in passing, but considering that it is the transports amount for something like between 23 and 27% of the energy-related CO2 emissions globally, it's been surprising for us, from our perspective, that it's so little attention is focused on the great needs to address this area and the challenges that we have ahead. This is from one of the organizations working with now as national appropriate mitigation actions by developing countries in the transport sector. I will mention that briefly later. So the estimates vary, as I said, between 23 and 27%. Some are in the group in those who do these kinds of assessments. And we also know that transport, both when it comes to land-based transport and aviation, will increase significantly by 2050. 50% increase, or a doubling of the light utility vehicles, the passenger transport, with a tripling of, at least a tripling of the global middle class will increase immensely. So about perhaps a 70% increase in the emissions from transport by 2050 in business as usual. This, which is an immense challenge. A few weeks ago, I don't know if you've seen that, there was an interesting and I think also enlightening commentary in Science by Felix Kreutzig and colleagues. Check it out if you're interested. I take a few minutes to explain this one, because it's a bit complicated, unnecessarily so, but I wasn't able to simplify. It's a three-dimensional graph. Where we can see here that these are the carbon intensity, the energy efficiency, and this is the demand growth, where the blue box here is the reference scenario for 2011. And in all these sectors, we see strong growth. This is the most complicated one, I think, because it's three-dimensional. So you have to read it this way. And then, well, you can't really see it. But of course, the aviation passenger is anticipated to increase significantly in all scenarios. we have the red is an ambitious mitigation scenario, which would be then in line with a 2-degree target. We talked about a 1.5-degree target, which I think would be great, but of course we know that we are struggling really hard to keep track of the 2-degree target, even if all the INDCs would be implemented, and a lot of them are requesting so substantial amount of technology transfer or finance that the present finance architecture we have in the UNFCCC doesn't at all supply. And then they need to be ratcheted up. And then on top of that, if you look at the INDCs, many of them mention transport, but a lot of them also require that substantial finance in infrastructure investments if the transport goes in the INDCs. I will return shortly to the INDCs. But I think this, even though it's complicated, it's a pretty good reminder of the enormous challenge that these incremental measures that we have so far doesn't at all supply. We need to some kind of awareness raising that these initiatives that Sweden have done, and we have several examples here, it's great. We are on the way, and I think that the graph that Matthias showed her in the beginning of the estimates when we try to project solar, the PV, that we often underestimate these developments in the long run. So that's great. That gives us some hope. But it is on the scale of those, the revolution we saw in PV that we need in the transport sector also. And then we can't just wait for 1 or 2 technology breakthroughs. It's great what we see in renewables, but we need a lot more focus on this if we are going to be at least close to the red scenario here in the science paper. So it is, as you notice in the negotiation text, but also in many INDCs, we are starting to see a mind shift, which I'm very happy for. We are not only seeing the climate issues pollution problem, and we are now seeing it as a challenge and inspiring such for transforming societies. We have seen society transformation several times throughout the human history, and not in particular since the Industrial Revolution. And the fossil fuel society that we are now trying to deal with was an example of society transformation, very much then focused on transport. So, I think there is a good chance that we might see that, because that realization that incremental change is not at all would take us close to 2, at least along 1.5. That has resonated. So it's very interesting to study some of the INDCs, and a bit depressing to study some of the others. About 2/3, I think it was 63% last time I checked, of the INDCs mentioned transport as an important area what the countries are going to do. But the vast majority are extremely vague on how to do this. Well, some of the INDCs, as you might know, are per se very vague. The European Union is one example of that. Very, very fluffy on how it's going to realize the goals. But of course, if you are 28 countries trying to agree, that's kind of hard to be precise perhaps. But some countries are extremely, like Ethiopia. It's very inspiring to read Ethiopia, and some others. But still, it is a realization, okay, we need to address transport, but still very vaguely, how do we do this? And also, if you look at the NAMAs, which is a concrete instrument where countries are asking perhaps for concrete measures, either policy-wide, sector-wide, or on a project level. It is today, I think it was 14% of the NAMAs that address assistance for transport. But some of them are quite inspiring. So that there is, and it is really about transforming cities, which I'll wrap up soon. Which I think we also consider that this resonates on a policy level. This graph is from I don't know, some of you might have filled in a questionnaire that Magnus we've done this since Bali, 8,000 responses altogether. One of the questions that were asked is on priorities for NAMAs. And we also completed we also asked the funders, for instance, also what they would see as appropriate NAMAs. And there is quite a willingness to address that, transport is an important one, and there is also finance for that. So that's the hopeful point if I'm going to end this. But we still little substance so far, few examples. That's why I like this seminar. That's why I wanted to be a part of it, because I think this is what we need to see how we can start thinking beyond the incremental change. And this is really something that we need then to communicate to the UNFCCC negotiations, but also when it comes to inspiring the IEDCs and other measures that we have to get some momentum in this societal transformation. I'd like to end with a quote from one of my colleagues that I collaborate closely with, Steve Rayner, is a professor at the Institute for Science, Innovation and Society at Oxford University. He says that climate change is not really a policy design problem. It's not a technology problem. It's a problem of imagination. Thank you. And this is the imagination comes now.
That's very good. Thank you so much, Björn-Ola. And now the last part is really, okay, what is a transboundary change and imaginative change to vehicle usage? Mr. Folkesson from Clean Motion, welcome. You want to be up here?
Yeah, I prefer this guy.
While he starts his presentation, I can say this picture won a contest that they had among kids. It's from Ukraine, 2011. My Blue Planet was called.
Okay. That's great. My name is Jan Olsson. I founded a company called Clean Motion in 2010. Basically because we saw a lot of opportunities also in the challenges in the transport sector. Matthias mentioned in his starting notes that the average car weighs 1.5 tons, and we are alone in the car, which means that we are transporting 95% weight. And weight is the same thing as energy consumption. So already there, we have a 95% potential. Not to mention that we are now at 1 billion cars around the world, cars and light-duty vehicles, and we are rapidly reaching 2 billion cars, if nothing drastic happens. But there are huge potentials even here, because we had a 95% problem, but there is a bigger one. It's 96% problem. That is 96%. That is the time the vehicle is parked. So it's used 1 hour per day. Parked 23 hours. Imagine if we would only park the vehicle for 19 hours per day by sharing. So only getting down to a 20% utilization. But that would mean that 800 million of the existing cars would be redundant. That is really promising potential. And we have the technology, but we need behavior change of not owning the car, but be member of a sharing service. What we did, we have developed a new super modern electric three-wheeler. You realize in the three-wheeler sector, still the vehicles on the street looks the same as they did 70 years ago. It's an area where the industry completely forgotten how to apply the technological advancements, and we decided to take a shot at that. Basically, we achieved energy efficiency that I think is really good. We are at 40 watt hours per kilometer, which is hard to translate perhaps, but if we would be using gasoline, with 1 liter of gasoline, we would go 250 kilometers. And basically with 1 unit of electricity, 1 kilowatt hour, we drive 25 kilometers. Other things you can do with 1 kilowatt hour of energy is boil 5 liters of water, or drive